Hosea, like Amos, belongs to the group of so-called minor prophets, which are 12 in number. They are called minor only because the writings are much smaller than the so-called major ones, Isaiah, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Amos is considered to be the first of these writing prophets, even though Hosea precedes him in the biblical order. However, Hosea and Amos were contemporaries and both ministered in the northern kingdom, although it was thought that, unlike Amos, Hosea was actually from there. Other prophets who were active during this time were Isaiah and Micah. Hosea's ministry is reckoned to be about 752 to 721 BC. Hosea focuses on Israel and, unlike Amos, is not interested in prophesying to other nations. He uses the imagery of family relationships and unfaithfulness which occur in other prophets, but is unique for being told to marry a prostitute and have children as a prophetic sign. Because of the reality of this drama, which is acted out in real relationships, it can make particularly difficult reading. Structurally, Hosea is divided into two. The first section is chapters 1 to 3, and the second chapters 4 to 14. Prophets sometimes acted out their prophecies. We saw that Samuel used the tearing of his robe to declare Saul's kingdom will be torn from him. A prophet named Zedekiah in 1 Kings 22:11 uses iron horns to show how Ahab will gore his enemies. In Ezekiel 12, Ezekiel is told to pack his belongings, dig through the city wall, and exit at night to show how the inhabitants will go into exile. And we saw how Agabus in Acts 21:11 takes Paul's belt, binds his own hands and feet, and declares that this is how the Jews will bind Paul in Jerusalem. Hosea being told to start a family, which will cause a lot of pain and disgrace as a living parable of the Lord's relationship with Israel, seems quite extreme by comparison. The first son is named Jezreel in verse 4. This signifies that God will destroy the house of Jehu, of which Jeroboam II is the last king. The Lord equates this with the destruction of the house of Israel because after this dynasty is toppled, there is a quick succession of short-lived kings and then the northern exile. The daughter is called Lo Ruhamah, which means not pitied. She signifies that God will no longer forgive Israel and that they will now certainly be punished. But verse 7 adds a note of hope for the southern kingdom, Judah. Judah was just barely spared destruction when the northern kingdom was carried off by the Assyrians, and after their own exile to Babylon much later, they returned to the land, unlike the northerners. The son is Lo Ami, meaning not my people. This sounds like a shocking rejection of the covenant made in Exodus, but in truth, Israel have made themselves, through their endless idolatry, into not my people, because they had decided that God was not their God. Immediately, however, we have the counter-promise. 1:10 reaffirms the ancient promise to Abraham about his descendants being as numerous as the sand on the seashore, and in verse 11, it promises that Judah and Israel will be gathered to take possession of the land. It is these promises which Paul takes up with reference to the inclusion of the Gentiles in Romans 9:25-26. Chapter 2 continues with the renaming of the two children, removing the not from both. Jezreel in the previous verse now signifies the day of restoration. Chapter 1 did not dwell on the awful relationship with Gomer, but an oracle in chapter 2 now does this. Only the husband and wife are explicitly the Lord and Israel. Stripping the wife naked in public was something the wronged husband could do, galling as it seems now. Everything this adulterous wife has enjoyed will be ended by her enraged husband, such as her provisions and festivals. But it is not merely vengeance, it is to show her that wine, grain and oil, the main agricultural products of Israel, came from the Lord, and not from the Canaanite fertility god Baal. What follows from verse 14 onwards is a fantastic vision of healing and restoration. In verse 2, the Lord had said, "She was not my wife and I am not her husband." But, as with the reversal of the naming of the children, the Lord will reverse this break in their relationship, as he says in verse 16. And in verses 19 to 20, he affirms he will take her as his wife forever, in righteousness and in justice, steadfast love, mercy and faithfulness. Notice that this is something that the Lord will accomplish. No longer do we have the covenant language of "if you will listen and obey," with the two ways imagery of curses and blessing. Now the Lord promises that he will restore.